Nobody's talking about interfering with the right of a parent to determine what kind of material his or her child should have access to. The issue really is the ability of a group of people, not even parents of students in schools, but a group of people or individuals who are able to go into a school district, a school board, in an effort to ban certain books. That is really the issue. And by any definition, I would consider that kind of effort to be an effort on book banning. And in fact, there are states that have already enacted legislation that makes it pretty easy to, for anybody to go in and list a book as inappropriate and therefore removed until it goes through some sort of a review process. I'm specifically talking about Florida as an example. So, Professor Knox, you've done some research on why there is this effort to ban books. Can you tell me what sorts of books are usually get on these banned book lists?
Yeah, I would say that, thank you for the question. So the books that usually show up on banned books lists are books that we consider to be diverse. And these are basically books about anybody who is not white, heterosexual, male, cis, books that are about LGBTQIA people, about people of color. These sorts of books are the books that we see on the banned books list. And I do want to address the idea of banning books. So really what we often say is that these books are not banned, but they are challenged. So like Biden's border crisis, Banned Books Week has a nice alliterative ring to it, but in fact, we talk much more about challenging books. And what this is removing books from access to its intended audience. So that includes both age appropriateness, but also who did the author intend this book to be read by? That is an important part of thinking about what we call collection development in libraries. We consider all sorts of issues when books are put in a collection, not just issues of, do we agree with what is being put on the collection, but also how do we show many different viewpoints and ideas? When we look at the diverse books that...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do understand that the target of a lot of these kinds of lists is books that depict diverse lifestyles, for example, if you want to call it that. And so, for example, one of the books that is being sought or challenged in Iowa is a book called Ho'onani Hula Warrior. This is a book about a child who doesn't see herself as a girl or a boy, but something in between. And this child dreams of leading the hula group, but everyone else thinks that only the boys should lead the hula group. And Native Hawaiians have traditionally recognized the existence of a third gender called mahu, and this book explores this and many other parts of Native Hawaiian culture. Yet this book could potentially be banned, as I mentioned, from a school district in Iowa for running afoul of a law against books for younger grades that deal with gender identity. Mr. Giannoulias, do you think, and also for Dr. Cox, do you think this book should be removed from school libraries?
Thank you, Senator. I personally do not, which goes again to the fundamental nature of our legislation, which is to allow librarians to make that decision. Okay. My guess is they would determine this book belongs in our libraries. The point I also want to make is, especially with regard to Hula Warrior, the goal of literature is to reflect back to the reader either the struggles that the reader is facing or to provide insight into struggles that the reader has never had to imagine. Books are a safe place for people who are struggling, who need help. And I would disagree with one of the opponents here today.
I do need to get to, sorry, and I don't even need the answer from Dr. Cox, but I do have another question for you. Is there any evidence that says that exposure to certain kinds of books leads to harm to a community? Does exposure to an LGBTQ plus book somehow cause harm to the reader? Is there any evidence to that effect?
Zero.
No, there is not. What I mentioned before is that books can be windows to learn about other people. So it might be that you have a friend who is thinking about their own gender identity and you want to know more. And reading a book like that one will help you understand what your friend is going through.
Mr. Chairman, I should think that there is more harm to a young person who thinks that he or she can be shot to death in a school than being exposed to certain kinds of subjects and books. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.